A little girl from the street shouted to a millionaire, "Don't eat that! Your wife put poison in it." When he went home to ask his wife for explanations, the millionaire was shocked when he saw what she was doing. The smell of trash was strong and nauseating, but Sophia was used to it. Her small, dirty hands rummaged through the contents of a dumpster behind a bakery, hoping to find something edible. The grey sky hinted that rain was imminent, making her search even more urgent. This was her daily routine, a constant battle against hunger and indifference. Passers-by averted their eyes, as if ignoring her would make her disappear. Sophia sighed when all she found was a piece of stale bread. She wiped it off as best she could on the sleeve of her tattered jacket before taking a bite. The dry taste almost made her cough, but it was all she had. The 13-year-old girl knew that even in this city full of restaurants and luxury, her survival depended on luck and determination. As she finished chewing, she heard laughter coming from a nearby restaurant. Curious, Sophia crept closer, drawn by the warm glow of the lights and the sound of clinking silverware. Through the spotless glass, she watched the scene inside. Well-dressed men and women laughed and toasted with glasses of wine. To Sophia, it felt like another world, one completely out of reach. But something caught her eye. A blonde woman with an elegant appearance stood next to a reserved table. Sophia tilted her head for a better view. The woman, who Sophia would later learn was named Amanda, glanced around to make sure no one was watching. From her purse, Amanda pulled out a small vial. The liquid inside shimmered with greenish hues under the ambient light, and she discreetly poured it onto the plate that was about to be served. She did it calmly, as if adjusting something trivial. Then she quickly walked away, leaving the plate in the hands of an unsuspecting waiter. Sophia's stomach churned, but not from hunger. What she had just seen felt wrong, very wrong. Even without fully understanding what she had witnessed, her instincts told her the liquid was anything but harmless. Could it be poison? And if it was, who was the target? Her eyes followed the waiter as he delivered the plate to a man sitting alone at an opulent table. He was dressed in a pristine suit, the kind of person Sophia imagined owned many things, maybe even the restaurant itself. Her heart began to race. He couldn't eat that. For a moment, Sophia hesitated. Who would believe her? Who would let her into that restaurant, especially to accuse an elegant woman like Amanda? She was a street kid, invisible to most, yet something inside her wouldn't let her stay silent. She wiped her hands on her tattered pants, adjusted the faded scarf around her neck, and took a deep breath. "You have to do something, Sophia," she whispered to herself. Determined, she walked toward the restaurant's entrance. The revolving door gleamed like a portal to another universe, and she knew stepping through it was just the beginning of a confrontation that would change her life forever. The restaurant's revolving door seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but Sophia couldn't back down. Her heart was racing, and her hands trembled as she pushed through the gleaming entrance. The moment she stepped inside, she was met with disapproving stares. With her tattered clothes and the smell of the streets clinging to her, she was a jarring contrast to the refined atmosphere. The restaurant was packed. Elegantly dressed men and women spoke in hushed tones as glasses of wine clinked on tables adorned with candles and floral arrangements. Sophia felt small, out of place, but there was no time to hesitate. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on the table where Amanda, the woman she'd seen pour the suspicious liquid, was seated. Amanda smiled with an unsettling calm, pretending everything was normal, while her companion, Michael Taylor, glanced distractedly at the menu. Sophia took a deep breath. "I have to warn him. I can't let him die." She darted toward the table, but she had barely taken 2 steps before a security guard intercepted her. He grabbed her arm, forcing her to stop. "Hey, kid! You can't be in here!" the man barked. "Please let me go!" Sophia shouted, struggling to free herself. He's in danger. I saw her put poison in his food." Her cry echoed through the dining room, silencing conversations. Amanda lifted her head, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes locked with Sophia's. A spark of recognition crossed her face, but was quickly replaced with a feigned expression of confusion. Michael raised an eyebrow, visibly annoyed by the interruption. He set the menu down and looked at Sophia. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Who is this girl?" "She's probably a beggar," the security guard said, tightening his grip on Sophia's arm. "I'll get her out of here." "No!" Sophia yelled desperately. "You have to listen to me. She put poison in his food. I saw her do it." Amanda leaned forward slightly, her face a mask of theatrical shock. "Poison?" she said, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Oh my goodness, what kind of accusation is that?" "Michael, she's lying. She's just some street kid trying to cause trouble." Michael looked at Amanda, then at Sophia. He seemed torn between irritation and unease. "This doesn't make any sense," he said, shaking his head. "Why would anyone do that?" "Because she wants to kill you," Sophia insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "I saw it. I saw her put something in the plate when you weren't looking." Amanda sighed, her calculated composure never faltering. "Michael, we can't let this ruin our evening. It's obvious this girl is just here to stir up trouble. Please, have her removed." The waiter, who had just arrived with the dishes, hesitated, unsure of what to do. Michael gestured toward the security guard. "Get her out of here. I don't have time for this nonsense." Sophia was dragged away, but she fought with all her might. "No, please, you're going to die if you eat that," she screamed, her voice now hoarse from the effort. "Please, believe me." Exasperated, Michael picked up his fork and took a bite of the food, ignoring Sophia's protests. Amanda watched, almost motionless, but there was a glint of triumph in her eyes. Sophia froze. "No, he can't have eaten it." For a few seconds, nothing happened. The restaurant buzzed back to life, customers shaking their heads and whispering about the scene. Michael took one bite, then another, as if curious about the dish. But then he stopped. His eyes widened, and his hand flew to his throat. He tried to speak, but only a raspy sound escaped. His expression shifted to pure panic. Within moments, he was trembling, his hands clutching the edge of the table as his body convulsed. "Michael!" Amanda cried, feigning distress. "What's happening?" The waiter dropped his tray with a loud clatter and rushed to help, but Michael was already collapsing to the floor, his face pale and lips turning blue. Sophia broke free from the guard and ran to his side, kneeling beside him. "I warned you! I told you!" she cried, holding Michael's hand. Amanda stood, still playing the role of a terrified wife, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of satisfaction before she slipped back into her mask of concern. "Someone call an ambulance!" she shouted as the stunned customers looked on. When paramedics arrived, Sophia begged to go with him, but Amanda quickly pointed a finger at her. "This girl must have done something to him. She came out of nowhere shouting horrible accusations," Amanda said, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, I was just trying to warn him," Sophia protested as the police, who had arrived with the paramedics, eyed her suspiciously. As they led her away, she glanced back at Michael, who was being placed on a stretcher, and vowed to herself that she would do everything she could to prove the truth. The sound of ambulance sirens echoed in the cold night as Sophia sat in the back of the vehicle, trembling with anxiety and indignation. The ride to the hospital felt endless. She knew Michael was in grave danger, and every passing second only heightened her anguish. Yet, instead of being treated as someone who had tried to save a life, she was regarded as a criminal. When they arrived at the hospital, Sophia watched as Michael was rushed into the emergency room. Doctors and nurses swarmed him, attaching tubes and machines, while Amanda followed behind, crying dramatically. "Please, save my husband," Amanda begged, her hands covering her face, though her eyes scanned the scene with calculated coldness. Sophia tried to approach, but a police officer blocked her path. "Stay right there," the officer barked, shoving her back. "I didn't do anything," Sophia cried. "I was only trying to warn him. She's the one to blame. She put poison in his food. I saw it with my own eyes." Amanda turned at the accusation, her face contorted in an exaggerated expression of shock. "What? How can you say such a thing? You stormed into the restaurant and caused a huge scene, and now you want to blame me? This is unbelievable." Her voice wavered just enough to seem authentic. The police officers looked at Sophia with suspicion. The girl, with her torn clothes and dirty hands, seemed to embody every stereotype of a culprit. Amanda, on the other hand, exuded sophistication and convincing grief. "Of course she's the one who did it," Amanda continued, punctuating her words with a rehearsed sob. "She barged into the restaurant screaming, and now my husband is fighting for his life. How could you not see that it was her all along?" "I didn't do anything," Sophia insisted, tears streaming down her face. "You have to believe me, she's lying. She poisoned his plate when no one was looking." "Enough!" one of the officers snapped. "You're in custody until we get this sorted out." But they placed handcuffs on Sophia, ignoring her protests. The cold metal against her wrists felt like a seal on her helplessness. Amanda, satisfied with the outcome, shifted back into her role as the concerned wife. "Please, keep this girl away from us. Michael needs peace right now," she said, dabbing at fake tears with the tissue. As Sophia was led out of the hospital, she desperately tried to appeal to anyone who might listen. "Ask the waiter! Ask anyone! I saw what she did, I just wanted to help." But no one listened. The disdain in the officer's eyes and the silence from those who had witnessed the scene at the restaurant were enough to crush any hope Sophia might have had. At the police station, Sophia was placed in a small, cold cell. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, trying to hold back her tears. The injustice of it all felt unbearable. She had risked everything to save Michael, and in return, she was being treated like the villain. Yet, even in the depths of despair, something inside her refused to give up. "They have to find out the truth," she murmured to herself. "Michael needs to wake up. He'll remember. He'll know I tried to help him." Across town, Amanda was seated comfortably in a hospital waiting room, sipping coffee brought to her by a staff member. Her demeanor was calm, but her thoughts raced. The plan had been nearly perfect. If not for that insignificant girl, everything would have gone smoothly. Now she just needed to stick to the narrative against Sophia. After all, who would believe a street kid over a devoted wife? In the hospital, Michael remained unconscious, connected to machines that monitored every beat of his heart. The room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the equipment. He was fighting for his life, but deep within his mind, fragments of the incident began to surface, shadows of a desperate voice shouting to save him. As the night stretched on, Sophia, alone in her cell, felt her hope flicker but not extinguish. She knew the truth was on her side. Now, she just needed a chance to prove it. Michael woke up slowly, as if emerging from a heavy, disorienting dream. His vision was blurry, and everything around him felt distant. The steady hum of machines monitoring his vitals filled the silence of the hospital room. The sterile smell of antiseptic invaded his nostrils, and the white light filtering through the curtains felt almost oppressive. He tried to move, but his body was weak, heavy. His head throbbed, and gradually, flashes of what had happened began to surface. Dinner at the restaurant, the desperate voice of a girl, screams about poison. Then, nothing. "Mr. Taylor?" called a calm, professional voice. He turned his head slowly and saw a kind-looking nurse standing by his bedside, checking his vitals. "How are you feeling?" Michael tried to speak, but his throat was dry. The nurse noticed and handed him a cup with a straw, helping him take a few sips of water. "Better now," he said with difficulty, his voice hoarse. "You're very lucky," she replied. The poison you ingested was extremely potent. If you hadn't been brought here in time, the outcome could have been very different. Poison. The word echoed in Michael's mind, bringing back fragmented memories. The girl, she had shouted something about poison. He looked at the nurse, concern now etched on his face. What happened? How did I get here? The nurse sighed, glancing at the papers on her clipboard. From what we know, you suffered poisoning during dinner. A girl has been detained as a suspect. According to witnesses, she stormed into the restaurant, screaming that your food was poisoned. There was a lot of confusion, and she was taken into custody by the police. Michael frowned, trying to piece things together. That girl, he began, hesitating. I remember her. She was shouting something, trying to warn me, wasn't she? The nurse paused before answering. That's what some people said, but the police believe she may have been responsible for the poisoning. She appears to be a street kid. They haven't found any clear connection between her and you, but she's been accused of attempted murder. The thought disturbed him deeply. Even with his memory still foggy, he had the distinct feeling that the girl wasn't trying to hurt him. On the contrary, there was something about the urgency in her screams, the desperation in her voice, that suggested otherwise. Where is she now? He asked, the urgency in his voice growing. She's in custody at the police station. The investigation is ongoing, but it looks like she'll be formally charged, the nurse replied. Would you like me to notify someone? Your wife, perhaps? Michael shook his head slightly, a sense of unease settling over him. Amanda. She wasn't in the room, which was unusual. The nurse seemed to notice his confusion. Your wife went home to the mansion. She left last night after the doctors assured her your condition was stable. She was very shaken by all of this. He nodded, but something felt off. Amanda didn't strike him as someone who would simply leave the hospital in such a critical situation. Still, there was something more urgent on his mind now. I need to speak with the police, he said, his voice regaining some firmness. And I want to know more about this girl. I want to see her. The nurse hesitated. Mr. Taylor, you're still recovering. Wouldn't it be better to rest a bit longer? No, Michael said, cutting her off. If she's in custody, and there's any chance she's not guilty, I need to know. She was trying to tell me something. I'm sure of it. Reluctantly, the nurse nodded. I'll inform the doctor and the police that you want to speak with them. Michael closed his eyes, letting his head sink back into the pillow. His mind was now a whirlwind. The girl's behavior at the restaurant seemed clearer, as if each fragment of memory was falling into place. The anguish in her voice, the way she had been ignored by everyone, including him. As he waited, his breathing grew heavier. He didn't know why, but he felt certain that the girl was the key to understanding what had truly happened. Something was terribly wrong, and it wasn't just about the poisoning. It was something bigger, something he couldn't yet grasp, and he was determined to find out. Michael sat on the edge of the hospital bed, wearing a shirt provided by one of the nurses. He looked stronger now, though the lingering weakness in his muscles reminded him how close he had come to death. In front of him, a local police officer stood, his expression cautious. I want the girl released immediately, Michael said firmly. She's not guilty. I remember now. She was trying to warn me about the poisoning. There's no sense in keeping her detained. The officer scratched his head, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Taylor, the girl was detained based on the testimony of your wife and others at the restaurant. She's a street kid, no prior connection to you and no one to defend her. Releasing her now could cause complications. Complications, Michael interrupted, his voice rising with anger. The only complication here is that you're holding an innocent child, while the real culprit is still free. Do as I say, or I'll make sure this turns into a public scandal. Faced with Michael's insistence, the officer finally agreed, promising to arrange Sophia's release immediately. About an hour later, she was brought to the hospital. When she entered the room, her eyes were red and weary, but there was a determination in them that Michael recognized instantly. "You're Sophia, right?" he asked gently. She nodded hesitantly. Michael gave her an encouraging smile. "I want to hear what you have to say. Tell me everything you saw." Sophia took a deep breath, hesitant at first, but then began to recount everything. How she had been near the restaurant, how she saw Amanda pour the suspicious liquid onto the plate, and how she had tried to warn him, knowing no one would believe her. Her voice shook as she recalled the disdain she had faced, but she stayed composed. Michael listened attentively, his face growing darker with every word. When Sophia finished, he remained silent for a moment, processing everything. "You're saying Amanda, my wife, put poison in my food?" he asked, as if he needed confirmation to believe it. Sophia nodded, her eyes locked on his. "I wouldn't have said anything if I weren't sure. I saw it with my own eyes." Michael stood, his thoughts racing. He knew Sophia had no reason to lie. Moreover, his fragmented memories of the restaurant reinforced her account. Amanda, always so composed, had something to hide. He needed to confront her. "Sophia, I need you to come with me to my house. If she did what you're saying, I have to confront her, and you're my only witness." The girl hesitated, but Michael seemed sincere. Finally, she agreed. "Thank you, Sophia," he said resolutely. "We'll deal with this now." When they arrived at the mansion, Michael entered with Sophia close behind, his heart pounding as he walked through the familiar hallways. Amanda wasn't in the living room, but he heard hurried footsteps upstairs. His intuition warned him. Amanda knew he was coming. "Amanda!" Michael shouted, climbing the stairs quickly. "Come out now!" The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. He pushed it open, finding Amanda hurriedly throwing clothes into a suitcase. When she saw him, she froze for a moment, but quickly resumed her task with an air of indifference. "Oh, you're back earlier than I expected," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Good to see you're fine. Now you can take care of yourself while I go on a trip." Michael clenched his fists, struggling to contain his anger. "Don't play dumb, Amanda. I know what you did at the restaurant. I know you tried to kill me." Amanda froze for a second, but then turned, a cold smile spreading across her lips. "Well, it seems you're smarter than I thought. Congratulations, Michael. It only took nearly dying for you to figure it out." Sophia, who stood at the door, felt a chill run down her spine at Amanda's icy tone. The girl stepped forward, staring her down. "I saw you put poison in his food. I tried to warn him." Amanda laughed, the sound echoing through the room. "Oh dear, of course you did. And no one believed you, did they? That's the way the world works. Who do you think they'll believe? A street kid or a devoted wife?" Michael stepped closer to her, his eyes burning with indignation. "Why, Amanda? Why would you do this? You could have just left, but you chose to kill me." She crossed her arms, her face displaying a coldness he had never seen before. "Because walking away empty-handed was never an option for me. I deserve more, Michael. I deserve all of this. And with you out of the way, that's exactly what I would have had." Michael felt a lump form in his throat. In that moment, he realized their entire marriage had been a lie. Amanda had never loved him. He had been nothing more than a tool in her plans. But before he could react, Amanda grabbed the suitcase and bolted toward the door. "Amanda, stop!" Michael shouted, but she was quick. Sophia tried to block her in the hallway, but Amanda shoved her hard, sending the girl to the floor. Michael tried to catch up, but his weakened body slowed him down. Amanda ran through the mansion and out the front door, her suitcase in hand. Michael and Sophia followed, but she was already starting the engine of the sports car parked in the driveway. The motor roared, and before Michael could do anything, she sped off, disappearing down the road that led to the city. Michael stopped, breathless, his heart heavy with frustration. Sophia, standing beside him, was panting but determined. "She won't get away, sir. We'll prove what she did." Michael looked at the girl, seeing in her eyes a strength he desperately needed at that moment. He nodded, pressing his lips together. "You're right. She may have escaped now, but I'll make sure she pays for what she's done." With the police already informed and a warrant on its way, Michael knew this night marked the beginning of a long road to justice. And by his side, an unlikely ally would help him rewrite the dark chapters of his life. The night was cold, and the city streets were dimly lit by streetlights that cast unsettling shadows in the alleys. Amanda drove as if she were in a rally, the car's engine roaring with every sharp turn she took to evade any potential pursuers. In her mind, only one thing mattered: escape. Escape prison, escape exposure, escape failure. Outside the mansion, Michael and Sophia were in an improvised taxi, as he wasn't in any condition to drive, and Sophia clearly didn't have that skill. Michael was explaining the urgency of the situation to the driver in hurried tones. "Did you see that car? A silver sports car? Follow it," Michael said, leaning forward. The taxi driver hesitated, but Michael's determined gaze and Sophia's alarmed eyes convinced him. The car sped up, and the chase began. Amanda was pulling away. The empty streets felt like a labyrinth, but she knew the city well enough to map routes that might confuse the police. Her phone buzzed incessantly beside her, but she ignored it. She knew it was likely Michael's lawyers or the police trying to contact her. She smirked bitterly. "Cowards! They think they can catch me," she muttered to herself, taking another sharp turn. Michael gripped the seat back in front of him as the taxi navigated the winding streets. Sophia sat beside him, her eyes sharp, pointing out every time Amanda's silver car turned a corner or briefly stopped at a light. "There! Left!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the air like an arrow. The taxi swerved sharply, skidding slightly but staying on course. "Michael, she's heading downtown," Sophia said, looking around. "It's near the restaurant." The mention of the restaurant made Michael frown. It was ironic that everything seemed to be converging on the place where Amanda's scheme had nearly killed him. Amanda knew she was being followed. In her rearview mirror, she spotted the persistent taxi. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. She couldn't let them catch her, not now. She took a narrow path, weaving through tight streets that led to an alley near the restaurant. Parking hastily, she stepped out of the car, grabbing a small knife she had stashed in the glove compartment. She was prepared to do whatever it took to escape. The taxi screeched to a halt. Michael and Sophia got out, and Michael looked at Sophia with concern. "Stay here. I don't want you to get hurt." Sophia shook her head, resolute. "I'm not staying behind. She almost killed you. I'm not letting her do anything else." Michael sighed but had no time to argue. They moved together into the alley, their footsteps echoing on the damp pavement. Amanda emerged at the other end, her silhouette outlined by the faint glow of a streetlight. Her eyes locked onto Sophia, who stared back firmly. "Well, if it isn't the little hero," Amanda said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You just love playing the savior, don't you?" Sophia stood her ground, but a chill ran through her as she caught the glint of the knife in Amanda's hand. "This ends here, Amanda," Michael said firmly. "You have nowhere left to run." Amanda let out a bitter laugh, taking a step toward Sophia. "I still have choices, Michael, and if I can't escape, at least I can make sure this insolent little girl never interferes with my plans again." She lunged toward Sophia, the knife gleaming for a moment in the dim light. Before she could reach the girl, Michael stepped in front of her. Amanda hesitated for a second, surprised by his speed, but it was enough for Michael to grab her wrist. The struggle was brief, but intense. Amanda was strong and desperate, twisting and fighting to free herself as Michael held her arm firmly. "You'll pay for what you've done," Michael shouted, but Amanda managed to break free, shoving him backward. She turned her focus back to Sophia, but the girl had already stepped away, picking up a piece of wood from the ground as an improvised weapon. With courage, Sophia held it up, ready to defend herself. "You're not going to hurt anyone else," she shouted. Amanda smirked, but before she could make another move, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Red and blue lights flooded the alley as police cars arrived on the scene. Amanda looked around, realizing she had nowhere left to go. Officers stepped out of their cars, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon and put your hands up," one of them commanded. Amanda let the knife fall to the ground and reluctantly raised her hands, but the look she gave Michael and Sophia was filled with hatred. "This isn't over," she muttered as officers handcuffed her. Michael, breathing heavily, looked at Sophia, who was still holding the piece of wood, her breath coming in short gasps. "Are you okay?" he asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. Sophia nodded, though she was still trembling. "Yes, I think it's finally over." Michael pulled her into a quick embrace, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude. Amanda was finally in custody, and the truth had prevailed, thanks to the bravery of a street girl no one had wanted to listen to. The sky was clear on the morning after Amanda's arrest, and the sunlight felt like a promise of new beginnings. Michael sat on the veranda of his mansion, holding a cup of coffee. Despite the comfort of his surroundings, his mind was still a whirlwind. The events of the past weeks had completely changed his life, but somehow he felt he was finally on the right path. The sound of light footsteps caught his attention. He looked up to see Sophia approaching. She was wearing clean, new clothes he had bought for her, but even with her refreshed appearance, her eyes still held a shadow of insecurity, as though she wasn't sure she truly belonged there. "Did you sleep well?" Michael asked with a gentle smile. Sophia shrugged, sitting in the chair next to him. "Better than on the streets," she replied with a small smile. "It's strange, having a real bed." Michael chuckled softly. "You'll get used to it. I hope you do, because I want you to stay here." Sophia looked at him, surprised. "Here, in your house?" she asked, as if needing to confirm she hadn't misheard. "Not just my house," Michael said, setting his coffee cup on the table. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I want you to be my family, Sophia. I want to adopt you." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she was speechless. Sophia had spent most of her life believing she was invisible, that no one cared about her. Now, this man, whom she had saved almost instinctively, was offering her something she'd never imagined possible: a home, a family. "Adopt me," she murmured, almost in disbelief. "Are you serious?" Michael nodded, his expression earnest. "You saved me, Sophia. Not just my life, but also my perspective. You showed me courage and determination, even when no one believed in you. The least I can do is give you the chance to have the life you deserve." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "I never had anyone," she said, her voice trembling. "I always thought I'd be alone." Michael placed his hand over hers, squeezing it gently. "You're not alone anymore. I won't let you be." Sophia finally smiled, a shy, hopeful smile. In the days that followed, Michael began the legal process of adoption. He hired experienced lawyers to ensure nothing would hinder the process. During this time, Sophia started adapting to her new life. At first, she was cautious, as if afraid the happiness was only temporary, but little by little she began to relax. Michael made an effort to include her in his daily life. He took her shopping for new clothes, introduced her to the mansion staff as part of the family, and even started teaching her basic skills like reading contracts and managing everyday tasks. He saw this as a way to prepare her to be independent and confident. Sophia, in turn, began to open her heart. She shared stories about her life on the streets, the hardships she had faced, and the moments when she had nearly lost hope. Each story deepened Michael's admiration for her. A month later, the adoption process was officially finalized. Sophia now had a last name, Sophia Taylor. When the judge announced the decision, she couldn't hold back her tears, and Michael, equally emotional, embraced her. "Welcome to the family, daughter," he said with a smile. Sophia laughed through her tears, still adjusting to the idea. "Thank you, Dad." Life began to take on a new shape for both of them. Michael rediscovered purpose in caring for Sophia, and she started dreaming of a future she had never thought possible. Together, they began working on social projects to help homeless children, an idea Sophia had suggested as a way to give back what she had received. Though the memories of the past still lingered, both found strength in each other. Michael moved past Amanda's betrayal, while Sophia learned to trust someone who truly cared about her. One quiet afternoon, Michael and Sophia were in the garden, tending to a small flower bed. Sophia looked over at Michael and asked, "Do you think everything we went through was worth it?" Michael paused for a moment, looking at her with a serene smile. "I think everything we went through brought us here. Sometimes the hardest things in life are what show us what really matters." Sophia nodded, gazing up at the blue sky above them. "I think you're right, and I think I'm ready for a new beginning." They continued working side by side, the silence filled with the sound of birds. It was a new beginning, not just for Sophia, but also for Michael. Together, they proved that courage and kindness could transform lives, even in the darkest circumstances. The love they now shared as father and daughter was proof that even amid betrayal and challenges, there is always room for hope and redemption. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.